Good evening, and welcome to the second session of our Rock of Faith Community Conversations. We're so grateful that you tuned in and excited about this virtual expansion of our annual Rock of Faith concert. This year, First Baptist Church of Greater Cleveland has received a grant to provide opiate education to the community. As a result, a group of very dedicated individuals created the Rock of Faith Community Conversations. This is a four-part series to bring the community education and awareness about opiate addiction and recovery. Last week, we aired our first session with Dr. Perrin and Dr. Saris. They shared with us a general overview of the opiate use disorder along with the various signs of addiction. Tonight, we will continue that conversation. Then next Saturday, the 12th, from 10 to 12, we will be distributing, along with the food bank and our food distribution, free food, but also Project Dawn will be here to talk about and distribute Narcan kits. This event is free and all are welcome. There will be no evening presentation next week, so you can take it easy. But we will pick up the following Saturday, September 19th, and end with a virtual Rock of Faith concert on September 26th, taking you through the journey of addiction and recovery. Each presentation will air live at 7 p.m. And you can find more of the information on the church website at firstbaptistcleveland.org. So mark your calendars, invite your friends, and please tune in. As I shared before, we've received a grant and are in need for your support by answering 3 simple questions. We can find the link to the comments in the section below. We want the state to know that our community is engaged and values these efforts of prevention and education. So please, take a moment and complete now as we move into our conversation. I'd like to thank Pastor Burris, Senior Pastor of First Baptist Church of Greater Cleveland, and myself, Ship Hollins, Director of Youth Ministry, here tonight to talk about how we know. So in life, if we start off, we have 3 particular topics. My career as a health educator, we find these topics hard to have a conversation with our children. Sex, death, and drugs. If we're honest as parents, we often dread these moments and find ourselves sometimes practicing in the mirror as to what to say, or with our spouses on what to say, how to say it, and the right time to say it. So, this organic conversation about your experiences or thoughts of having those talks we're going to have today. So I'd like to invite in to the conversation our senior pastor, Dr. Kregg Burris. Why is this conversation so important?
You know, I want to say I really appreciate Ship, you and others from our congregation to really address this important topic. It is a crisis that is impacting so many. And it's not just young people. I know particularly the focus is on young people. But as a minister of many years, I've known adults of various ages that have become addicted to opioids of various types. Maybe they had a surgery, an injury, and they started a prescription, and that kind of took over. But in particular, you mentioned those 3 questions about young people. At a very young age, at a time of their lives where they're still trying to figure out who they are, and their body is still changing. the addiction issue is something that many young people are drawn into from various forms. There are some that they just want to kind of fit in. They may be somewhere where they're passing around drugs or some kind of and they want to try. They want to experiment. Others, they want to just try to, again, do something to kind of give them a high, something, an experience. And then there's others that are really struggling with issues with home, work, social media. And so they want something that will just help them deal with their inner problems. And a long time ago, people oftentimes would go to mom and dad. Mom and dad really is one of the best sources of information.
Yes.
But today we find it's through teachers, some at school, and even the church has been an important part for many to find the education, to experience some of those same questions, the deeper philosophical, theological questions, and be a resource for help. So it's not just an issue that affects young people, it affects people of all ages. But particularly vulnerable, though, are the young people. No, Ship, you're a teacher.
Yes, yes.
I'm sure that you...
So one of the things that we battle with, and we had a conversation about this before, when we talk about sex and drugs, most of the kids have access to the internet. And if you can't tell them right away, they're going to go and find it. So the conversation that we think is difficult to have, we would much rather them have it with us, because there's so many different avenues and not credible sources. The sources aren't credible.
Yeah, the internet is so easy today. Our young people have grown up pretty much with a cell phone practically in their hand. One of the things I saw just recently is that the symbol for a phone, if you ask a certain person age, they would say a phone is this. But now our young people, it's this.
I didn't know.
And again, it's not just this, but it's it's wireless. You could just say Siri and ask a general question, and Siri will give you an answer, or Alexa, or or Google. Hey Google, and you get instant information, and our young people are used to that. Yeah. And so if they have questions, whether they're doing their math homework, or if they have questions about whatever, even drugs. There's a wealth of information on the internet, but not all of it is accurate, not all of it is good, not all of it is beneficial.
That's right.
And some people then use this information to help locate where they can find drugs or create something that would be addictive, or not always the best. Again, the church is here to demonstrate to young people and their families the ways that you can find not only just information, but to find connections to deal with the deeper issues that oftentimes they are addressing.
Absolutely. And that's as we're talking in classes or as a teacher or lecturer, we find that those drugs are being used for those such things, to cover up something that may be a deeper root. But we will have Charde Hollins, who's going to come and talk to us a little bit later about such things. Being within the church's role over the years has changed many times. We had a great conversation, I believe, probably our first conversation about social economics in the Bible, and the idea of where was the church supposed to help.
Yeah. If you go back in the book of Acts early on in the early church, this was a time, the big power in the world at that time, especially where the Bible opens up in the life of Jesus in Israel, and then going on as it spread, was Rome. But Rome did not have a lot of social services. There was a lot of areas by which people tried to survive the best way they could. Yeah. And one of the early ways the church made an impact, not just sharing the good news of Jesus, which is the primary, but was to demonstrate through acts of social services and a ministry to orphans, to widows, to those that were hungry, those who were in need,
Yes.
and those that were the various addictions in their day. And whatever that happened to be, more likely in the Old Testament, New Testament, alcohol, but still various types of other addictions. As we've come across time, we've seen that the government has taken a lot of those roles away from the church. Not necessarily away, but they have become better funded and better equipped to deal with that. But still, the church meets a fundamental need, and I appreciate the doctor in our last session, he talked about the importance of hope. Because a fundamental truth is that we who believe that God has a plan and a purpose for our lives,
Yes.
is that he loves us. And love is the greatest motivator, the greatest power of all. Many people are looking for love, whether it be the love for parents, or love for maybe someone that they're in a relationship and they're struggling, or a love of what's going to light the passion in their lives.
Yeah.
And they easily can get addicted to a chemical that they ingest within their body or smoke or inject, and this robs them of the full capacity to explore the person that they are as a substitute. And part of the recovery is to allow a person to open up to do this exploration of who they are and the relationship that God has for them in their lives.
Absolutely. And on the school end, we can surely say our job as educators would be to keep the creativity that a person has naturally been born with, keep that alive. So it goes right along with, as you said, Pastor, the identity of a young person. The Lord, come as you are.
Mm-hmm.
He made you. He created you. Therefore,
and loves you.
Come as you are. Yes.
Yeah. A lot of young people today, and again, as we see generational shifts come and go, there's a lot of individuals that are struggling. They look at the church and they see oftentimes a building or an organization. They see oftentimes whether it be hypocrisy, which we see a lot in the national scene, or they see a sense of all kinds of rules and regulations, so it's distance. But the real nature, the heartbeat of God, and the heartbeat really of a church, whatever that church might be, needs to always focus upon a sense of acceptance, embrace, and invitation. All of us are broken.
Yes.
You know,
I mean, yeah.
we don't have to be perfect to go to church. I think that's the big thing people don't think. Oh, once I get my act together, I'll show up in church.
That's right. Nobody wakes up and acknowledges and says, "Hey, I think I'm going to get addicted to opiates today."
No, there's struggles, and we all struggle. And what happens is when we turn to God and to the person of Christ, who really does love us, and that's the whole sacrifice of the cross,
yes,
to demonstrate the full magnitude, the strength of his love towards us, that he accepts us wherever we are, whether we're involved in an addiction or we're coming out of an addiction or about ready to go into an addiction. He loves us and invites us into a relationship. And that is the most powerful form of hope that God wants to see you through and allow you to be the person that he has intended for you. So there's all types of different helps, but the church is an important one of those helps to help us move a person in their maturity and their relationship and their personal identity.
Outstanding. So as a church, we do believe, we aim for love and acceptance by the things we've done, by the things we will do. So we encourage people of faith to consider those things that we have just currently addressed by accepting and inviting those to be caregivers and mentors to not just young, but also old. And then to connect the two generations together. So with that, tonight, we have with us a mental health and addictions expert, Charde Hollins. She's an executive director of Relevant Therapeutic Connections. She has experience in serving justice involved with youth, with trauma, addiction, and behavioral concerns. We're happy to have her here and for us to share more about how we can support our children, our people, our older, and those we love through mental addiction and recovery. So tonight, we'd like to invite Charde Hollins.
Thank you so much, Ship and Pastor, for having me today. Good evening, everyone. It is a privilege to be here to speak with you about this so important topic. I am honored to share the stage with a church that recognizes the importance of recovery, mental health, and making sure that the church is not just four walls, but in the community making a realistic difference. So kudos to you, First Baptist Church. Kudos to you, Pastor, and your leadership team for taking on this challenge and accepting this opportunity to do true ministry. As Ship said, my name is Charde Hollins, and I'm the Executive Director for Relevant Therapeutic Connections, and I'm simply here today to continue this conversation and share with parents and teens more about opiate use disorder, how we can help. So the very first thing that I want to start with is simply letting you know that Jesus is real and therapy is biblical. Now, how does that tie into recovery and addiction? It's very simple. When we think about the people in the Bible and the things that they went through, Jesus did a wonderful job of putting examples in the Bible of people who were not perfect. And that is good news for us. That is good news for us who have mental health issues or who have recovery, and we're going through recovery or have addictions. We recognize that because of the examples that Jesus Christ gave us with his disciples and the people that he says walked closely with him, that we are in good company. And because we are in good company, we don't have to ask the question of why we are addicts or why we're going through this, because we know why. We know it's because of sin. But rather, we are going to ask the question of how. How can I help? How can I tell? And how will I know? So those are the things that we want to cover through these series. Not why, because we know it's sin, but how, because we want to know how we can help. So here we go. As we talk about opioids, there are various forms of this. There's oxycodone, hydrocodone, methadone, fentanyl, and the list goes on. So opioids are a medication version of something that's very similar to our endorphins. Now, endorphins are what our body naturally produces for us to combat pain. So when you think about opioids, they are usually prescribed because someone is going through pain. So the doctor prescribes them because you have an injury, you have a toothache, or something is going on. And many times there are people who become addicted to this. Just like Ship says, no one wakes up or writes in their journal that I want to be addicted to opioids. No, what happens is you might have had an injury, you went to the doctor for some help, and he prescribed you this. And then as time went on, you recognize that you are becoming more lenient on this medication and you just can't seem to give it up. So what are some signs to know that you may be in this category? When you start noticing that you're taking the medication, not necessarily for pain, but to feel the sense of being high, or to just be in a space where you feel more comfortable to socialize, or when you feel as though you cannot move without it. Dr. Parrin and Dr. Saris did a wonderful job last week of sharing with us just some general information as well as signs and symptoms of what we can look for our loved ones. But what about our parents and our teens? How can we as parents help our children not to become one of the statistics for addiction, or if they are struggling, how we can support them through recovery? Well, the first thing that we talked about last week is when we wanted to know, well, how is it that someone becomes addicted? What are the percentages? What are the backgrounds? And many times, the doctor shared that 50% of those who become addicted are because it is a hereditary. And hereditary means it's in our DNA. And where does your child get their DNA from? They get them from us, our parents. So as parents, we have to recognize that even though, yes, we want our children to think that we are absolutely amazing and perfect, that we have to share with them in an appropriate way the truth about what may be in their genes so that they know what to look out for. If I know that addiction is in my background and in my genes, then as a child, as a teenager, I can be more cautious of knowing that experimenting with my friends may not just be a one-time thing, because I am 50% more likely to become addicted because my parents had conversations with me about the fact that they struggled, or my grandparents struggled, or my uncle or my aunt struggled. So as parents, we have to recognize that we need to be vulnerable with our children in an appropriate manner and share our own experiences about what it is that we went through when we were growing up and what it is that our parents and our other loved ones went through. Because 50% of those who are become addicted is because of hereditary reasons. And we can help our children kind of move away from that if we ourselves are vulnerable and share with them information. So that's the first thing that we can do. I know it's tough to have these conversations, but it is important. And once again, Jesus, as our master example, he put the stories of David, the stories of Peter, the stories of Paul, and he did not make us think that these people were perfect. No, he told us all of David's mess. He told us all of the things that he did, and yet and still, David was a man after God's own heart. So it's okay that you are different than how you were. That is a reflection of who God is and what he has done for you. Allow your child to know that testimony and share with them the struggles, but also that you have overcome and you have been redeemed, not just because life is perfect, but because of Jesus and because of treatment. So that is the first thing as parents that we want to do. We want to be vulnerable and we want to speak and share this information with our children. We also want to make sure that if you do have medication in your home, that you dispose of it safely. There are, and people do it. You get a medication, you keep it, you may not take all of it, and it kind of just sits in your cabin, and you don't think anything about it. Or you might just toss it in the trash to get rid of it. But we have to recognize that when there are other people in the home, we may not be aware of the struggles that they go through or the curiosity that they naturally have. And someone can easily go into the cabinet and take the medication, or into the trash and take the medication. So we want to dispose of it properly. And how can you do that? You can return it. You can find a return space. Usually if you talk to your pharmacist, your Walgreens, your Rite Aid, or any of those things, or your doctor, and ask them if I return my prescriptions back here, will you all take them? Most of them will say yes, and if they say no, they can direct you to the correct space so that you can return them properly. And if that's not an option for you and you want to just throw them away, that's fine too. What we want you to do is mix them with something that no one will want to taste. Yes, you can use your imagination, but you can use cat litter, you can use garlic, you can use dirt. Mix the medication with something so that someone who may be triggered to utilize it, after they see what it's mixed with, they wouldn't want to do that. So that is an option. And then there's also the option of flushing. So you can also flush it down the toilet. You do want to look and make sure that it's compatible with the drainage and the sewer system and things of that nature. But those are the three ways that we can dispose properly as parents to make sure that our loved ones are not able to get their hands on prescriptions. So that's returning it to your local pharmacy or to a respectable drop-off center, mixing it with something that no one will want to taste, or you can flush it. And of course, if you're throwing away the prescription with your name and address, you want to make sure you scratch those things off and that your personal information is not on there. So that is what we want to do. We want to be transparent and have communication with our children to let them know about what we have overcome within our family's generation, and we want to dispose of our medications responsibly. What else? So Like I said, Jesus is real and therapy is biblical. And because of that, we recognize that treatment is needed. And we want to make sure that we supply our children with the proper treatment and the proper resources for them to talk about what is triggering them and what can help them. There are several wonderful resources that are available here in the Cuyahoga County area. There's New Directions, there's recovery resources, and the list goes on. But you want to make sure that you talk to your doctor or and find a therapist or an addiction specialist that can really talk things out. One of the other things is we have to recognize that there are about 4 steps that we want to take as parents to have our children be more willing to share things with us. And you know, when I look at the steps, they're very similar to what it means to have a relationship with God, right? You know, God is our Father, and how he deals with us is how we should deal with our children. We want to have good communication, just like how Christ wants us to speak with him daily. We want to speak with our children daily. We want to make sure that we get to know them, not just that because we created them and we see them every day and they have our genes, we automatically feel that we may know them. But God literally created this entire world, and he still takes time to know us. And for that same reason, we need to take time to communicate and to know our children. We want to change the way that we structure our sentences. So many times our children can do things that honestly just drive us crazy. And we think, what were you thinking? Now, if you look at your teenager and ask them what were they thinking, that may not come off very well to them. But how many times is God sitting on the throne looking at us as parents thinking, what were you thinking? But instead, let's reframe the way that we communicate. Let's reframe our sentences and realize that even though they may have done something that wasn't the best, clearly they did it because in that moment it was a stressful situation. So possibly saying something like, it seems like you were in a bind. What was going on in your mind during that time? It's the same question, right? But it came across so much differently. We recognized that there was something going on with them, so now we have validated their experience because we say, it seems like you were going through a lot at that time. What were you thinking? We still get what we want in knowing more about our child and getting that communication, but it comes across more as, I understand that you went through something, tell me about it, rather than, I can't believe you did that. What a fool. And we don't want to be like that, even if we're thinking it, because once again, we want to communicate with our children the same way that Christ communicates with us, because we are his children, and he communicates with us in good communication. We also want to encourage. Encouragement is so important, not just to children, but even as adults. We like encouragement. When you're on your job, or when you're with your spouse, or even as an adult with your parents who are now elderly, you want encouragement. So of course our children are the same way. And Christ, he encourages us every day. He encourages us with his promises. He encourages us with his blessings. He encourages us with sacrificing his life. So what can we do here on earth to encourage our children? We can give them positive affirmations and tell them just how wonderful they are. Not in a generic way, but in a very specific way. You know the ins and outs of your child's character and personality. Find something that they are really good at and acknowledge it and say something about it. Whether it's the way that they laugh or the way that they smile, the way that they pick up after themselves or the way that they do their homework, you know, find something. The fact that they enjoy drawing, even though they might listen to the music very loud, I really appreciate the fact that you're creative. Your creativeness is very inspiring, and it's going to be worth money someday. Tell them something that will empower them and encourage them, and be sure to do that with good communication. The other thing we want to do, which Christ also does, is set limits. Yes, we want to have wonderful relationships with our children. Yes, we want to have good communication and we want to encourage. But we also want to set limits. Christ does not allow us to just run up and down the streets of the world. He gave us the 10 Commandments to show us and to tell us exactly how we should live our life so that we make sure that we represent him as Christians. The same goes with our children. We want to make sure that they represent our last name well, so we set limits. And you want to make sure that those expectations are very clear. Christ made his expectations very clear in the Word of God through the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not steal. He didn't make it super long words with a whole bunch of things that we don't understand. He wasn't very mysterious in the way that he decided to share it. He was very clear and very direct. Do the same with your children. Have that good communication through encouragement and set limits, letting them know what your expectations are and also following through with those expectations. Because we all know that from the time they come out of the womb, they are constantly checking to see if we're going to follow through. Whether they're 16, 20, or 1 years old, our children consistently check to see, okay, I know you said do this, but are you really going to follow through? But you have to remember, we can't be too mad at them, because don't we do the same with God? And didn't we do the same to our parents? Consistently trying to push the edge to see, okay, God, I know you said this, but... And just as God handles us, he continues to have good communication and encouragement, but allows us to recognize that his limits and his expectations are sincere, and there are consequences if we don't abide by them. So do the same with your children. And lastly, we want to know your children's friends. It is important that you engage in your children's social life. Yes, we want them to be independent. We want them to know how to move and do without us. We want them to go and flourish. However, we still want to be involved. We want to make sure that we know what's going on, that we know who their best friend is and why it's their best friend, that we know what movie they're going to see. You know, these are normal questions that you can ask and that it's okay to ask. And because you have good communication, you've encouraged them, and you've set limits, when it comes to knowing their friends, no, you won't always be cool, but that's not your job. You will be the parent that your child is proud to say, okay, yes, mom, yes, dad, I'm going to see so-and-so. But because you have followed this plan of good communication and encouragement, they know it's because of love, not because of restriction, because isn't that what we know about God? God wants to know the people that we're closest to. He wants us to tell him about the intricacies of our day. He wants to know about your loved one, your spouse, the one that you crush on, whatever the case may be. He wants to know about those things. But it's not because of a restriction. It's because he wants to know you. And the same thing goes with us as parents. And so, children, I'm speaking to you now. If you just happen to be walking in the room while your parents are listening, I want you to know that your life matters. And during this time, many of your friends may be doing some things that are experimental that may seem to be fun at the time. But everything that seems fun isn't always right and can lead to be death. We learned that last week through our doctors when they talked about the overdose of opioid use. So we want to be very careful to make sure that if we are prescribed medication, that we're using it in the way that it was prescribed. If you feel that you or your friend have a problem and need some help, please find a trusted adult and go talk to them. Whether it's a teacher, a counselor, your parents, your uncle, your mentor, your pastor, whoever it is, find someone. It is not your responsibility as a young person to take on the burden of someone else's recovery, whether it is your friends or your parents. because we know that even though parents love their children, we're not always perfect. And you may be watching and your parent may be the one who is going through some of these triggers and some of these signs and symptoms. I want you to know that it is not your fault, and it is not your job to be the one to control their recovery. What you can do is reach out to someone, call a number, talk to your pastor, talk to your teacher, look at the website here for this church to learn more. There's a crisis text line that you can use. It's 741-741. This text line is available to anyone at any time for any crisis reason. So if you are going through something and you feel as though your life is not worth living, or you feel as though things are just so overwhelming and there's no one you can talk to, anytime during the day, whether it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon or 4 o'clock in the morning, you can literally pick up your phone and text 741-741. And you can text for hope, and they will answer. Or you can text, hey. Maybe you don't even have the gumption to say for hope because you may not have hope in that moment, but you need some help. You can text hi, and do you know somebody's going to text you back and say hi? And you can have a conversation with someone who is trained to help you, and they will engage you in conversation and provide this good communication and this encouragement to help you get through another day. And if you need some ongoing support and you need more than just that moment of crisis, they can connect you with someone who can help you more long term. So this text line is available to anyone, young or old, anywhere in between, 741-741. And I invite you to use it. I encourage you to use it, because just like Jesus, we all need someone to support us, someone to be there to count on. Jesus was the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and he still came down and had 12 disciples. That was a lesson for us to recognize that even though we have a wonderful Savior, we still are in need of companionship. So we want to surround ourselves with people who are like-minded. No, they are not perfect, but they are like-minded and have the same mission that they want to be successful. Not only successful in recovery and successful in life, but successful in spending eternity with Jesus Christ. So I invite you to reach out to that text line, reach out to the pastor or anyone else who is a trustworthy adult, and get the support that you need. Also, September is National Suicide Prevention Month. So I want to take this time to talk to anyone who may have some suicidal ideations, or may know someone or have a loved one who has died by suicide. I invite you to reach out as well for help. The suicide talk line is 1-800-273-TALK. 1-800-273-TALK. You can call that hotline at any time as well and talk to someone, because your life matters. And Jesus died just for you. And he died so that you can live. And yes, we go through some hard times. And not everyone knows exactly what it is that you go through. And not everyone actually may try to act as if what you're going through doesn't matter, but it does matter. And it does hurt. And it is unfortunate. But your life is important, and there are people who are willing to help you. There are people who are willing to support you. And even Jesus wept. Yes, Jesus wept. And he even said, God, if you can pass this cup from me. So it's okay if you're going through things that make you feel like, I don't know if I can take this anymore. But what's most important is recognizing that you can. You can move on. You can press towards another mark, because Jesus is real and therapy is biblical. So find someone to talk to that can help you on your long-term journey of mental health and also recovery. I thank you so much for having me. If you want to know more information, please feel free to visit the website below. And learn more about how you can assist your teens with drug abuse. This link has wonderful information that is helpful to both teenagers, adolescents, as well as parents, and even teachers. So if this is something that you want to learn more about, I invite you to reach out to that link and get some more resources. There is so much more in store that we have for you as this series continues. This is just the second of 4 that we have. As Ship said earlier, we will be off for next week because we have a wonderful ministry opportunity with partnership with the food bank where we will distribute food to the community, so all are welcome. During that time, we will also have our Dawn partners here distributing Narcan kits. And so if you or a loved one are in need, please come, get some food and get a Narcan kit, and most of all, get filled with the Holy Spirit. We invite you again to tune back in on September 19th, where we will continue this impactful conversation, and also when we will close on September 26th with the Rock of Faith concert. We are going to have Ship come back up and close prayer with us. I'm Charde Hollins from Relevant Therapeutic Connections, and it has been a pleasure to be here with you. I ask that you guys take all the information that you have learned over these series and make sure to apply it in your life. Thank you for having me, and here is Ship.
What an outstanding job. We thank Charde for that information. As a person who loves Christ and who is there for the community. So we'd like to close in prayer, if you bow your heads with me. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the opportunity. We thank you for the gifts that you've given us, and we know that you take us as we are. We thank you again for the individuals who are here and who will be here and will do your will to serve the community, to serve your children, to serve those in the world that have challenges. We ask that you continue to be with us as we leave these 4 walls and go out and be the light that you would have us to be. In Christ's name we do pray. Amen. And we'll see you next session. Good night.
As Michael's illness sort of took off, and again, it was very, very acute, he actually began using needles, and that's not something I was ever used to, because Anthony had never done that. And that to me was horrifying, because I knew what the recidivism was with someone who's going through recovery after that. So the worst part was he was found by his dad after overdosing in the bathroom. That was our first really, it was just shocking to us, and we didn't know what to do. Like, this is something we'd not traveled yet. And so luckily, or not luckily, he stopped using the needles over time. He had a couple of overdoses, but he started to begin snorting. Usually that doesn't happen, so this was a little unusual. But again, Michael would crash and burn, is the best way to put it. He would crash and burn. He would get arrested. He would end up, overdosing, whatever the case may be, end up in the hospital, rehab, or jail. And each time Michael came out of it full-fledged, I'm going to go to meetings, I'm going to do this, and he did. And I think Anthony would agree. He really did want to, and he really did try, but it would fizzle. We'd watch it fizzle every time. Now that happens in cases of children going through, recovery, but these were like a high and a low, very, very much a high and a low. And so I'll cut to the chase. We went through 10 years of recovery and overdosing and relapses. And each time he would get himself back up on his feet and get a really good job. And me and my ex say everything he touched, he turned to gold, because he just did. He could turn it around and he would do whatever he had to do to get there. Whether, I recall the last job, he would Uber just to get there, even though he couldn't drive. He just in that way. But it was slow again. When he would relapse, it would be a slow, you'd start to see those same things I mentioned, sort of just kind of disappearing, not answering his phone as much, just things that weren't his character, and maybe not that bubbly, happy Michael that would run in the room kissing and hugging everybody. It just stopped, it slows down. So about 2 years ago, he actually had a relapse that was pretty severe and lost the love of his life, and after just too many relapses. And he was pretty devastated, but he did pick himself up. He got a great job. He was personal training, sales manager at a gym, very successful. I joined the gym, saw him every day. He was doing wonderfully for at least about a year and a half of that time. Just wonderful. Like, it was excelling in sales, doing great. And I would say in January, we noticed a little bit of a change. Me and my ex-husband, we noticed he wasn't answering the calls as much. He wasn't calling and being as bubbly. There was just that old Michael was coming back. And then the virus hit in March, and they closed the gym, and he started to, I was quarantining with him at my house, and he was doing a lot of pacing and just again withdrawing, and we found out he was drinking. So again, just that slow and insidious disease is creeping back into play. And the night before we found him, that morning before he and I went to the gym with his girlfriend, left the gym, and he decided he was going to go back to his house instead of mine. And his girlfriend called in the morning on the 23rd, just screaming that he was dead. And my son Anthony went out, and we went out and saw his body, and that was rough. Something you never want to go through. But the loss of Michael is, it's just been a tragedy to so many, and it's not just our family. Michael also lost two of his best friends in the last 5 years to overdose addiction, and I think there were many things that he struggled with that he just didn't want to talk about. He always wanted to be happy. He wanted everything to be good, and the world to be shiny, and there wasn't negativity in his world, and I think he kept that all inside when he started to feel he was slipping again. He just didn't feel he could come to us or anyone.
About that day, well, I can tell you that personally, I've been through a lot myself, and I would say that day, March 23rd, would probably take the cake as the single worst day. It was unbelievably traumatic, very. I still, to be honest with you, don't even know how to really. I don't even know if I've really properly processed the whole thing. It's been 5 months now. I still can't get the image of my younger brother on the floor dead, because the whole situation was very quick. I'll never forget what happened. I was on my way out the door from my house, and I was getting ready to go to work. And it was about 7:30, and my wife was at home like 8 months or something, and she called me. He's gone, he's dead, he's gone. And I'm like, what? It's like I haven't even drank coffee yet. Right? I mean, the whole thing was just so bizarre. And from that point going forward, it was just a big blur. I remember picking her up, driving out to the house he was living in, and just seeing things that really nobody should have to see. Witnessing things that morning that I don't think anybody parent, brother, doesn't matter, that nobody should really have to see. Very difficult to digest and understand, and but also, ironically, a very sobering moment where you really realize, what can happen here, and the consequences of decisions that are made. Because there's consequences to every decision, and it was tough. It still is tough, and it's very upsetting. It really is. It's a very upsetting situation, and I still, you have to forgive me, I still don't know really how to
I want to go a little bit further back toward the beginning where we talked about how addiction is something that can affect anyone. And I think that that's general knowledge at this point, but still, no matter how hard we try to, share that knowledge, there's still this stigma and shame around it. And so I guess from your perspective, Kathy, like what can you do like as a parent to share with other parents that this is something that really isn't the fault of the person who's experienced it. It is a disease. And then Anthony, like, how does it feel? I know like how I felt. Like I was very much ashamed, when I realized I had a problem, and just kind of like how we overcome that. Just kind of share a little bit about that.
Yeah, this is probably, to me, the most important topic we can have on this. Obviously, my son's story, I'm not afraid to share, and I've been all over social media and all over websites and anything and anywhere. I've even had a local news channel interview. Anything I can get my voice out there to tell his story, I will. But also, it's coupled with how do we change this? It's not all about, okay, so because we're stuck in stigma, and that is exactly the problem. It's the root of everything. And I do believe my son might be alive today if it weren't for stigma. And he had more shame, and I can't speak for Anthony. I'm quite sure he had shame and was embarrassed. It's not, society has decided to put value on people the way that they pick and choose. And the stigma depicts someone homeless on the street, and yet we're talking about a 31-year-old, wonderful young man that was successful, that was had a great personality, had friends, was not anything like the depiction of what an addict or what people like to call junkie would be like. And that is in my travels, which is pretty much every single day, is supporting moms. And I'll talk a little bit about that, but seeing these pictures, these kids, knowing videotapes, we're talking everything you could ever imagine. I'm at the forefront of it more than the police, more than the rehabs. I mean, I'm at the forefront of it with thousands across the nation, millions across the nation. And no one looks like what they say an addict looks like. So the general public that hasn't been affected by this, just, I think it affects is it 2 out of 10? It's something along those lines. It's
2 out of 10.
So think about those people that aren't affected. They've got what they've got in their head, and it's very hard to erase that because it's just been ingrained for so long. And so the only thing that we can do and should do is educate and continue to speak about it. It's one thing I will never be ashamed of with my children. And Anthony can tell you, I've been speaking about it for years, even when they were in and out of recovery. It doesn't matter. We have to talk about it. We have to say their names. We have to bring this up, and we have to change the viewpoint. I just personally think that this is where we've got to focus. We've got to educate. We've got to get resource to the folks out there that need it. Resources, and resources. Support, understanding. We've got to try to rid the shame. The shame is what I believe put Michael in that room that night alone, not telling anyone where his thoughts were going because he was ashamed. He had done so well. We were all so proud of him. And now I'm going to have to tell everybody? No, I'm just going to try to do it and handle it myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So from the perspective of somebody who is on the flip side, I would say that there is definitely a lot of, well, while you're in it, while you're in addiction, I would say that there is definitely a lot of shame and a lot of guilt, for sure. Those are things you really need to work through if and when you ever get sober. But during the while those years were going on for myself, I didn't want anybody to know anything. Period. You know, I didn't want anybody to know anything about me. I was not the type of person to. I was very much a loner, especially towards the end when it came to my addiction. I was afraid of what you might think. I was afraid myself, you know, of what was going on. I definitely didn't want to anybody else to really know the extent of what was happening, and I would do everything in my power to keep that from anybody. And that definitely keeps a person sick for a lot longer. I really don't know, to be honest with you, how to break that cycle. But what I do know is that, you know, especially when you get sober or when you enter into sobriety, those are all things that you have to work through. At this point in my life right now, I don't care who knows about my past or what was going on. You know, that stigma has, I couldn't care less. I really don't. I don't go around parading it, but at the same time, if somebody asks me, I'm definitely not ashamed to help or explain. You know, I mean, there's a lot of people in my life right now that didn't even know me back then. So they would have no clue. Like, my wife didn't even know me back then. She has no idea what kind of a complete lunatic I was back then. But you know, I agree with what you were saying. I agree with what my mom was saying. The stigma is going to hurt more than help. And if you were to look at my brother's like a prime example. If you were to look at him, you would never know in a million years that he was in active addiction. Like, he just did not, like, you know, you think of some dude on the street in some cot, whatever, you know, like whatever these cartoons or whatever movies depict. It's not the case half the time. I mean, it is true in certain situations, but with somebody like him, you would never know. You would never know. He looked like a bodybuilder. You know what I mean? Like, he looked like the last person that would disrespect their mind or their body in that kind of way. Just did not. And it's not just him. There's a lot of people. I know tons of people in recovery and you know, in other parts of my life. They just you would never know. So you know, that stigma that people carry around, oh, he's a dirty drug addict, or oh, he's a, you know, this or that or whatever. You know, that's the kind of response that keeps people ashamed from explaining their reality, because they don't want to be looked at like that. They don't want to have somebody talk to them like that or treat them like that, or they don't want any of that, really. You know, it's hard enough having to carry that around on a daily basis. That's a job in and of itself. And then on top of it, you have society or whoever looking at you, you know, through these glasses. Do you think that really helps? Probably not. So yeah, you know, I can see it. It's interesting in my case because, you know, I spent so many years in that life, and now I've spent almost as many years not on the other side of the fence. So it's very interesting for me sometimes to talk about this topic and look at this topic, because I definitely remember how it was while in it, and then I can also obviously see what's going on now, you know, as I've gotten older and kind of worked through those issues. I can sympathize with both sides of the fence, and you know, it's something that I think needs to change you know, I don't know how you really go about changing something like that. But yes, I don't think it helps any. No.